Now that we're finally on the other side of the 9-month journey that was the 5-lug swap on Project Low Fairmont, I take a look back and reflect on whether or not Ranger Rotors really were the budget-friendly option. My name is Grant Tommy, this is Straight Six Man, helping you build your hot rod and your confidence without a ton of money. And today, since I'm going to be breaking down sort of my reflection on whether or not the Ranger Rotors is a viable option for a 5-lug swap on a Fox body, I figured since I'm going to be talking quite a bit, I'm going to do something else while I talk to you guys. So we're going to wash the Fairmont. As you can see, it is out of the garage bay. As I mentioned, I thought it'd be pretty boring if I just sat there and talked to you guys the whole time. So we are going to be washing the Fairmont. Bought this mitt at like O'Reilly's, but we are using this limitless lather. This is a product, this is an Uzolu recommendation. So I'll leave a link down in the description below to that. But stick around to the end too. I plan on doing a budget update for Project Low Fairmont, so you guys know exactly how much is left of that $4,000 budget before we start the head swap. But let's get into the brake discussion. Okay, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to kind of divide this conversation into two parts. That is, were the Ranger Rotors worth it for me? And then, could the Ranger Rotors be worth it to you? So I'll explain as we go on later. But first off, to bring you kind of up to speed on where we left off since the last video, if you caught the last one, and well, if not, I'll leave a info card up over here. But I did clearance on Friday. I clearanced the calipers from the rotors to make sure I could pass my 10 thousandths feeler gauge through. Now that seems to have done the trick, and we seem to be on the other side of that, with the exception of, as I was trying to dial in the proportioning valve and kind of riding the brakes hard over time. Obviously my rotors are heating up, so I still do have a little bit of that built-in metal lathe problem. Go look at some of my Instagram photos from last week, you'll see what I mean. But that's only after riding the brakes hard, so I might clearance them a little bit more, I might leave it alone. It's kind of like, I don't know. But I do believe my passenger side rotor is still sticking based on heat and things like that. But anyway, let's get into, is it worth it? All right, first off, was it worth it for me? Short answer is no. These Ranger Rotors were not worth it for me. From a budget standpoint, they are a viable option, and we'll talk about that later when we start talking about is it worth it for you. But it's all contingent based off of my whole entire setup. And so that, of course, is going to involve the Lincoln Mark 7 rear end. So why spend time talking about the rear end when this is supposed to be about the front brakes, you may ask? Well, you have to like weigh it out over the whole package to make this decision. And so we start with the Lincoln Mark 7 rear end because that complicated a few things for me. Well, first off, let me just say, one of the objectives for the project was I wanted to put an 8.8 rear and 5-lug swap the car in the back. And that thought being, if I'm going to flip the car, I wanted it to be appealing to someone who just wants to junkyard LS swap an old 80s shitbox, for lack of a better term. Knowing that they have a rear end that can handle the power they're going to throw at it. I'm not going to throw that power at it in the budget build, but I wanted it to be like a platform when I sold it. In comes the Mark 7 rear end that I buy, and doing my research up front, I thought I was only increasing the track width by 3/4 of an inch on either side, but I was wrong. It's more like an inch and, I don't know, inch and a quarter or something like that. And so with the added track width also came rear disc brakes. So rear disc brakes weren't necessarily an objective of mine or a need, but I was forced to have to try to cobble together a 4-wheel disc brake setup. And I thought I could do it with these Ranger Rotors. I really did. And yeah, kind of with like a B- B grade, I have. but it's not great. So with the added track width of the Mark 7 rear end meant I had to run a high offset wheel like my Crown Victoria wheels, which I don't mind. I kind of wanted to run that all along, but it's caused me to do a 1-inch spacer in the front. And the cost of 1-inch spacers, although I haven't paid for them yet, these are a set on loan to me from a friend, which eventually I will have to buy him another set. It's basically like, they're not cheap. So if I had to do it all over again, SN95 front spindles, better front brakes to balance out the rear brakes of the 45mm piston rear Varga style calipers that I had, I think price-wise wind up being a wash. Because if you recall, I wound up still putting in new front brake lines, which is you'd have to do with SN95 setup. I also had to do new ball joints, which you would have to do with SN95 spindles. And so it's just, you know, good practice when you're turning a brake system, which I've tried not to do, but I'm going to wind up doing it anyway. It's just go ahead and replace old parts while you're at it, and that's what I wound up doing. So I think from a total cost perspective, I would have invested basically the same amount of money on an SN95 spindle front, you know, especially assuming you could like go to a salvage yard or something and find the whole spindle caliper pad setup, and like I said, you know, then buy new calipers. But I'm gonna wind up doing that anyway. Like I said, I think the front passenger is sticking now. So for me, doing Ranger rotors for a 5-leg swap in the front was not really a good budget opportunity. Now I'll tell you where it probably would pay for itself or be a great option for a budget solution. So if not having an 8.8 isn't crucial to you in your build, your Fox Body build, if you're just going to keep the 7.5 that your car probably came with, then I say yes. I think Ranger rotors for the front is a great option, because assuming you're going to do something like find Ranger Aerostar rear axles just to pull the axle shafts out and put in your axle housing, your drum brake size in the back, you're not going to be goofing around with any of the front components, master cylinder, all the things I've had to do. So you'll have a balanced system, so the front to the rear is going to be balanced. And so in that case, I think the Ranger rotors are a great option. However, know the things that I've struggled through, like I mentioned earlier in this episode. A Ranger rotor is like basically like a little over 10¼ inches in diameter, whereas a stock Fairmont or Fox Body front rotor is a lot closer to straight up 10. There's about 3/16 of an inch difference in diameter. So that's where I ran into those clearancing options. So know that going in. But I think the Ranger rotors, if you just wanted, you know, 5-lug wheels just for the looks and none of that extra stuff like 4-wheel disc brakes and you know, an 8.8 strength rear, go for it. Alright, so sorry, the wind's picking up. I'm trying to keep my camera out of the wind as much as possible. But again, and I gotta keep myself in the sunlight. Keep in mind all the factors we talked about. You gotta weigh this against your whole system. So again, if you're just gonna keep your 7.5, you're gonna keep drum brakes, I say do the Ranger rotors. If you're not, if you want 4-wheel disc brakes, if you end up with a wider track like I did with the Mark 7 rear end, I say no, don't do the Ranger rotors, just go SN95 spindles. Or, you know, if you found like a junk Mark 7, pull off those spindles, or SVO front spindles and front disc brakes. But those are kind of my thoughts on, you know, now that I'm on the other side of it, hopefully I can help save some headaches, heartaches, whatever for you guys. Before we get into the budget, there are probably two things I still need to qualify, and that is that you can find drum brake 8.8 rear ends out there. However, very limited options that are already set up for your Fox body. So like an Explorer or Ranger 8.8, while it's going to have a good track width, it's not going to have like the control arm brackets and all that stuff. Second thing is what I didn't quite explain probably the best was, so an SN95 spindle, depending on which years you buy, actually widen your track width up front. So that would have prevented me from buying 1-inch spacers. So whatever extra money I would have spent probably on those spindles over my current setup, I think basically would have swapped out for the 1-inch spacer price. But anyway, it's time to really, let's talk budget. All right, so we are in the garage now, hopefully out of the wind. Hopefully that's not a distraction anymore. But maybe my neighbor using a post hole digger or the other neighbor mowing the lawn might be distracting now. I don't know, but it's time for a budget update. It's been a long time. I checked my records. It was October since I last did budget update for Project Low Fairmont, so we will over here be throwing some figures down. But the last time we left off, we basically, of the original $4,000 budget, had $533.44 left. And then the account that for the longest time I was holding any of the savings, and I did actually get 10 cents in interest paid to that account, so add a little bit back there. But then I've never, this basically I bought brake line for that, for the rear end, going from, it's basically to the hose drop at the center of the pumpkin, back to the factory hardline location. So I bought some copper tubings to get from there to there, those 2 points I talked about. That was $11.94. And then of course I bought new brake pads for the front. We mentioned that a couple episodes back, with using cashback bonuses and stuff through my credit card. That only hit the budget up $8.94. So the grand total now, we are down to $513.13. Thanks for sharing the episode, or at least I hope you have, on a forum somewhere. If you've been struggling with that, what do I do for a 5-lug swap? Of course, there's these other videos talking about my 5-lug swap with Ranger Rotors. That's going to do it for this episode. Please comment if you have any questions. Like or subscribe if you haven't. But that's going to do it for this episode. Until next time, peace out.